All right, we have some big names that are reporting on Thursday, January 15th. So I'm back on the Kiplinger site where it's real handy dandy. You scroll down, jump to category, and you can see the folks that are reporting. Now, I am going to definitely talk about some of these bigger banks like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. So let's head over to my trade station for that. So we're going to look at price, time, and momentum across these tickers because I'm HEMA ready and that's what I do. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's start with BlackRock, ticker BLK. We have the high from last week and the low from the week of November 14th as the main support and resistance levels. In the short term, though, it's just consolidating over this December 18th low. See how it keeps coming back towards it, but not able to break below? And the RSI Power Zones are basically at neutral, meaning they're dancing around at that 50 level. So there still needs to be sort of more information. Where I find help here is in forecasting. So looking at the bigger picture swings, here is where the most recent forecast was that might help shape what will happen next. All right, check this out. As early as November 24th, you could have had a forecast for BlackRock to trade up into 1122.18 by January 5th, and it did it precisely on the dot, made the high that day. Sometimes forecasts hit on the nose like that, and it's great. So what happened? The shares have turned lower, but they're not tumbling out of bed just yet, right? I still think, though, that there's more of a chance that they trade lower than higher based on the RSI Power Zones. Sure, it's at neutral, but recently formed a peak in the bear resistance power zone. So I think that a journey back toward this November 20th range is not out of the question. Here are the main support levels there. All right, let's move along. All right, Goldman Sachs on its weekly chart, up and to the right, pushing up and most recently hanging out near the bull resistance power zone. So I don't even have any resistance to draw. There technically isn't any right now in the market, except for last week's high, but that's just a bar high. I'm more interested in actual turning points in price. And 2 weeks ago, we had a low. That's the low that I'm watching. Now let's look at that in the daily chart. You can see we made a beautiful trough on the RSI back on October 22nd and been higher since. And there's multiple moves higher, what I call drives, Gann drives. I think we're within a Gann drive off of the low from December 17th. So what this means for me is I think there's further room to the upside on this stock, though not by a whole lot. Okay, maybe $1,000 area. Then I'd be interested to see what the RSI Power Zones does if it's disconnecting from the price action. All right, here's MS, Morgan Stanley. Also, pretty straight up in terms of momentum and price action, though this week it's been a little weaker. We have a very short-term support from a couple weeks ago. Now let's look at it on the daily chart. So here it's already doing more of a pullback. So it's heading into an area where I think we could find some support. I think there's a decent chance we form a tradable low while above 170 if the RSI Power Zones also don't plummet to the bear support power zone, okay? I'd want them to stay in this 40 to 50 area. All right, let's look at the next stock. Okay, TSM, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. So we shift away from banks, but this is one of the bigger stocks in the S&P. I think it's just behind NVIDIA. So if it moves a lot, all the broad markets move a lot too, right? So let's look at it in the weekly chart. As I said, we always want to get that perspective. Now, if you are an intraday trader, obviously the weekly and daily that I'm presenting here just give you a broader scope of analysis. You absolutely can make trades on intraday levels. I'm just sort of getting that middle pulse by looking at the daily chart as my last stop. All right, so on the TSM chart here, the weekly is pushing up to new highs. However, the RSI Power Zones have not yet exceeded their last peak. That's not a concern just yet. It's just something to keep an eye on. And if I go to the daily chart, I can see that we had a very recent support here from January 8th. So that's the low to watch. If we break below that low, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a deeper pullback towards the 289, 290 area, okay? This December 17th range. If we keep chugging higher, cool. The next stop is probably in the 350 zone. So that's my take on a few of the bigger stops reporting earnings January 15th before the open, and that's important to remember that these are happening before, so Thursday morning. And if you found value in this video, helpful analysis for stocks you're watching, technical analysis reminders, go ahead and hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.